Parents told everyone I was studying abroad. They didn't know I was in basement and I escaped. The Caldwell family Christmas card arrived in mailboxes every December, like clockwork. My mother insisted on professional photography, color-coordinated outfits, perfect smiles, and a lengthy letter detailing our family's achievements. This year's edition featured my sister Claire's acceptance to Harvard Medical School, my brother James's clerkship with a federal judge, and the announcement that I, Olivia Caldwell, had been accepted to Oxford University's prestigious creative writing program. Only one of those things wasn't true. I stared at the glossy card in my hands, reading the paragraph about me over and over. My mother had even included a photoshopped picture of me in front of Oxford's iconic spires. I laughed bitterly at the irony. I was reading this news about myself while sitting on a thin mattress in our basement, where I'd been living for the past 3 months. The basement was cold despite the space heater they'd reluctantly provided. My bedroom consisted of a mattress on the floor, a small desk with a lamp, and 3 plastic storage bins containing the clothes they'd allowed me to keep. No phone, no computer, no contact with the outside world. "It's for your own good, Olivia," my mother had said the day they locked me down here. "One day you'll thank us." I doubted that very much. The argument that led to my imprisonment had been brewing for years. Unlike my perfect siblings who followed the paths our parents had mapped out, I'd always been the family disappointment. While Claire dissected frogs and James debated constitutional law at dinner, I wrote stories and dreamed of becoming a novelist. My father, Richard Caldwell, was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and sat on the boards of 3 prestigious universities. My mother, Eleanor, chaired half the charity committees in Boston and had been featured in Vanity Fair's Women of Influence issue. In their world, creativity was a hobby, not a career. Writers are dreamers who live in poverty. My father had sneered when I'd announced my plans to study creative writing in college. No daughter of mine will waste her potential on frivolous fantasies. I'd tried to compromise. I agreed to double major in English and business at Boston University. For 2 years, I maintained perfect grades in both fields, but my heart wasn't in the business classes. When I won a national short story competition my sophomore year, I thought they might finally see my potential. Instead, they dismissed it as luck and just a small contest. The final breaking point came when I was offered an internship at a literary agency in New York. It wasn't glamorous, mostly reading slush pile submissions and getting coffee, but it was my dream. I'd applied in secret, knowing they wouldn't approve. I still remember my mother's face when I told them over dinner. She set down her fork with such deliberate precision that the silence seemed to echo. "And your summer finance internship at your father's firm?" she asked. "I was going to tell you." "I don't want it," I said. "This is what I want to do. What I'm meant to do." My father's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. "What you're meant to do is live up to the Caldwell name. We've given you every advantage, every opportunity. And this is how you repay us? By throwing it all away to fetch coffee for some struggling publishing house." "It's a respected agency," I argued. "And everyone starts somewhere. I need to follow my own path." "Your own path," my mother repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you know what your own path looks like, Olivia? A dingy apartment with 5 roommates. Food stamps. Obscurity. Is that what you want?" "I want to try," I said. "I'd rather fail at something I love than succeed at something I hate." That was when my father threw his wine glass against the wall. Claire and James stared at their plates, never once coming to my defense. "You ungrateful little fool," he hissed. "We've invested too much in you to let you throw your life away. Either you accept the finance internship and drop this writing nonsense, or you're no longer welcome in this family." I should have seen it for the threat it was. Instead, I stood my ground. "Then I guess I'm no longer welcome." I'd expected to be kicked out. I had friends I could stay with, at least temporarily. What I hadn't expected was what came next. That night, I packed a bag, planning to leave in the morning. But at dawn, my father entered my room with 2 men I didn't recognize. They were polite but firm as they escorted me to the basement, a space I'd barely visited before, used mainly for storage and my father's wine collection. "What is this?" I demanded. You can't just lock me up. We're not locking you up, my mother said, following behind. We're giving you time to reflect on your choices. This rebellion ends now. They took my phone, my laptop, even my ID. They informed me that I'd officially withdrawn from college to study abroad, a story they'd already begun spreading among their friends. The world will think you're at Oxford, my father explained. And when you've come to your senses, maybe you'll be studying something worthwhile. Until then, you'll remain here. I screamed. I threatened to call the police. I promised to tell everyone what they'd done. Who would believe you? My mother asked, her voice eerily calm. The troubled daughter making wild accusations against her successful, respected parents? We've already consulted with Dr. Harrison about your increasingly erratic behavior and declining mental health. He's quite concerned. Dr. Harrison was our family physician who had known me since birth, and who owed his position at Massachusetts General to my father's influence. This is insane, I whispered, the reality of my situation sinking in. You can't do this. We can and we are, my father replied. Sometimes love means making difficult decisions for those who can't make them for themselves. The door locked with a definitive click, and just like that, I ceased to exist in the real world. During those first weeks, I pounded on the door until my fists were raw. I screamed until my voice gave out. I attempted to escape every time food was delivered. But the basement had no windows, the door was solid oak, and my parents had installed a sophisticated lock system that required both a key and a code. Eventually, resignation set in. I was allowed books, paper, and pens. So you can channel your creativity in a harmless way, my mother said. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything they did, every lie they told. It kept me sane. Above me, life continued. I heard the footsteps, the dinner parties, the arguments, and laughter. They spoke about me as if I were having the time of my life in England. I heard them discussing what to post on my social media accounts they had created or hijacked to maintain the illusion. Oxford is so charming in the fall, my mother dictated one evening, presumably to Claire, who managed the fake profiles. Make sure to use that filter that makes the buildings look more golden. I learned that they told everyone I rarely called home because I was so busy with my studies and new British friends. They said I was finding myself and thriving away from American pressures. Meanwhile, I was withering in a basement, my identity stolen, my future on hold. But something unexpected happened during those dark months. As I wrote in my journal each day, my voice grew stronger. My stories became sharper, more honest. Without the pressure to conform to my parents' expectations, I wrote with a freedom I'd never known before. And I began to plan. Because despite what my parents believed, I wasn't broken. I wasn't going to submit. And I wasn't going to disappear. One day, the world would know the truth. And when that day came, the golden illusion of the Caldwell family would shatter forever. But first, I had to escape. I marked time by the sounds above me. The grandfather clock's chime. My father's heavy footsteps leaving for work at 7:30 a.m. The cleaning service on Tuesdays and Fridays. And most painfully, the dinner parties where my name occasionally floated down through the floorboards. Olivia sent the most charming photos from Bath last weekend, my mother would say, her voice carrying that perfect note of maternal pride. The architecture is just breathtaking. I never went to Bath. I'd never even been to England. Yet according to the Caldwell family narrative, I was living a storybook life abroad while writing insightful essays about British culture. One day, my mother brought down my weekly supply of books, clean clothes, and nutritionally balanced meals. Heaven forbid the basement prisoner developed scurvy. What would the neighbors think? She seemed especially cheerful. Your Oxford post got over 300 likes, she announced, as if I should be pleased. Everyone thinks your commentary on British versus American university traditions was so insightful. What did I say? I asked dryly, since I didn't write it. She ignored my tone. Claire did a marvelous job. She studied your writing style for weeks to get it right. The engagement on your profile has never been higher. The casual way she described the fraud made my stomach turn. My sister, who had barely spoken to me in years, was now pretending to be me, analyzing my writing to better impersonate me online. "Can I see it?" I asked. My mother hesitated before pulling out her phone. "I suppose there's no harm." She handed me her phone, open to my Instagram page. The account had transformed from my occasional book reviews and coffee shop photos to a carefully curated exhibition of Oxford life. There I was, or rather, my face badly photoshopped onto scenes of collegiate bliss. Me, in a punt on the River Cherwell. Me, at formal hall dinners. Me, in the Bodleian Library. The captions were what hurt most. They sounded almost like me, but twisted, like a funhouse mirror version of my voice. Finding kindred spirits who understand that literature isn't just entertainment, but a gateway to understanding humanity's deepest truths. So grateful for these late-night discussions with my Oxford cohort. #blessed, #literary scholars, #Oxford life. I would never use that many hashtags. I would never say #blessed unironically. But unless you knew me intimately, which few people did, you wouldn't spot the inconsistencies. The comments were worse. "Living the dream, Liv," from a high school classmate. "Your parents must be so proud," from my mother's friend. "Can't wait to visit you next summer," from a cousin. All of them talking to a ghost. A fabrication. A lie crafted by the very people who had locked me away. I scrolled through months of posts, each one more elaborate than the last. Weekend trips to Paris. Literary festivals in Edinburgh. Guest lectures from famous authors. "You've been busy," I said, handing back the phone. "We all have," my mother replied without a trace of irony. "Your father has connections with a travel blogger who supplies the background photos. Claire handles the writing and responses. James manages the technical aspects to ensure the posts appear to come from England." It was a family project. Maintaining the lie had become their bonding activity. That night, I pressed my ear to the heating vent to eavesdrop on dinner. They were hosting the Whitmores, a family with connections to several university boards. "Olivia's professors say she has remarkable insight," my father boasted. "They're already discussing publishing opportunities for her work." "That's wonderful," Mrs. Whitmore replied. "Our Jeremy is struggling at Princeton. Perhaps Olivia could mentor him when she returns for the holidays?" My mother's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, I'm afraid she won't be home for Christmas. She's been invited to a writing retreat in the Cotswolds with several published authors. We couldn't possibly ask her to miss such an opportunity." My absence at family gatherings had been neatly explained away. I was always just too busy, too engaged in prestigious activities to return home. The perfect excuse. Later that evening, I heard them in the study, planning my next adventures. "We need something academic, but not too pretentious for next week," my father said. And Claire, tone down the literary references. Professor Harmon mentioned that the last post seemed unlike Olivia's usual style. "Got it," Claire replied. "I was thinking something about research in the archives. Discovering some obscure female poet." "Perfect," my mother agreed. "And we should include something about her being invited to that exclusive dinner with a visiting American novelist." They crafted my life with the same precision they used to plan charity galas, every detail considered, every possibility accounted for. Meanwhile, I lay on my mattress in the basement, the reality of my situation crushing me. My identity hadn't just been stolen, it had been improved upon, polished, and presented as the ultimate success story, the Caldwell daughter fulfilling her literary ambitions while remaining firmly within the bounds of respectability. Every like on that fake profile wasn't just a deception, it was another brick in the wall between me and freedom. The more people who believed in Oxford Olivia, the fewer who would believe the truth when if I ever escaped. But as I listened to them plot my fictional life, something hardened inside me. They might control my present, but they would not determine my future. One day, their perfect lie would become their perfect downfall. I just needed to find the key. Day 147 of my captivity began like any other. I awoke to the sound of the shower pipes groaning overhead, my mother's 6:15 a.m. ritual. I'd counted every brick in the basement walls, 864, read every book they'd given me twice, and filled 7 journals with my thoughts, stories, and plans. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford, but routine kept me sane. I never expected that Wednesday to be different. There were no signs, no omens, just an ordinary day in an extraordinary imprisonment. That evening, my father hosted a small gathering of his executive team. I could hear ice clinking in glasses, forced laughter, and the familiar rhythm of business small talk. Around 10 p.m., the front door opened and closed repeatedly as guests departed. Then came the sound I knew well, my father's footsteps heading to the kitchen, followed by the rattle of dishware. He always brought down my dinner himself when they had company, not trusting the staff with their family secret. The lock clicked and the door swung open. My father appeared with a plate of leftovers, salmon, asparagus, and roasted potatoes. Catered food was a far cry from my usual meals. "Dinner," he said curtly, placing the plate on my desk. His eyes were slightly unfocused, his movements less precise than usual. I could smell the scotch on his breath. "Your mother says you need more books. Make a list." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I'd learned that compliance reduced suspicion. He turned to leave, his hand reaching for the doorknob. Then his phone rang. "Richard Caldwell," he answered sharply, stepping back into the hallway, but leaving the door ajar. "Yes, I just sent the projections." "No, that's unacceptable. We discussed this." The call absorbed him completely. I sat frozen, staring at the 3-inch gap between door and frame. My father paced in the hallway, his voice growing more agitated. Eventually, he stormed upstairs, the phone still pressed to his ear, the basement door forgotten in his alcohol-fueled irritation. I waited, counting to 100, then 200. No returning footsteps. My heart hammered so loudly, I was certain it would give me away. Slowly, I rose from my mattress and approached the door. With trembling fingers, I pulled it open wider, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. The hallway was empty. This was it. The moment I'd imagined for months. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my journals and stuffed them into a pillowcase, along with my meager treasures, a photo of my grandmother, the only family member who'd ever encouraged my writing, a silver pen she'd given me for my 16th birthday, and the cash I'd squirreled away from the allowance my mother occasionally provided. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I ascended. Each sound was a gunshot in my ears, but the voices from my father's study continued uninterrupted. I reached the top and slipped into the kitchen. Through the window, I could see the security guard at the front gate, but I knew from years of teenage sneaking that the service entrance at the back of the property was rarely monitored after 9 p.m. I moved through the house like a ghost, past rooms where I'd once lived a normal life. Family photos lined the hallway, images of a perfect family that no longer existed, if it ever had. I allowed myself one final glance at a picture of us at Martha's Vineyard, taken when I was 14. Before expectations crushed dreams. Before walls became prisons. The night air hit my face like a benediction when I slipped out the back door. I hadn't been outside in almost 5 months. The stars seemed impossibly bright, the wind a gentle welcome. For a moment, I stood paralyzed by the immensity of the world. Then reality returned. I was still on Caldwell property, still in danger. I moved quickly across the manicured lawn, keeping to the shadows of the tall hedges. The service gate was unlocked, as I'd hoped. One push, and I was on the street. Free. But freedom without resources is its own kind of prison. I had no ID, no phone, no credit cards. The Caldwell name, which had opened doors my entire life, was now my greatest liability. If I used it, they'd find me. If I contacted anyone from my past, they'd find me. I walked for hours that night, staying off main streets, keeping my head down when cars passed. By dawn, I'd reached downtown Boston, where anonymity was easier to find. I ducked into a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee with my hoarded cash. "You okay, honey?" the waitress asked, eyeing my disheveled appearance. "Just had a rough night," I replied, offering a smile that felt foreign on my face. "Haven't we all?" she said, sliding an extra piece of toast onto my plate. That small kindness nearly broke me. I hadn't experienced genuine human connection in months. As the sun rose over Boston, I sipped my coffee and made a plan. I couldn't go to the police. My father's influence reached too far, and without evidence, it would be my word against theirs. I needed to disappear, build strength, and gather proof. I watched a group of tourists take selfies outside, tagging their locations, sharing their experiences in real time. Meanwhile, I was probably posting about Oxford's Spring Gardens or some literary salon. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had escaped my physical prison only to find myself in a wider one, a world where everyone believed I was someone I wasn't, somewhere I'd never been. But I was out. I was alive. And for the first time in months, I was the author of my own story. Freedom demanded sacrifices. My first was my name, Emma Walsh. I practiced in the grimy mirror of a youth hostel bathroom. I'd paid cash for 3 nights, claiming I'd lost my ID while backpacking. The tired desk clerk barely looked up. Emma needed a history, so I created one. Raised by a single mother in Chicago, community college education, traveling before settling down. Simple, forgettable, impossible to verify. Finding work without ID proved challenging but not impossible. Cash-only establishments asked fewer questions. I washed dishes at a diner, cleaned rooms at a motel, walked dogs for wealthy professionals. I kept my head down, saved every dollar, and crafted my new identity piece by piece. In a secondhand bookstore, I found salvation. The owner, Mira, needed help cataloging her chaotic inventory. She didn't care about my past, only that I knew Faulkner from Fitzgerald and could work the ancient register. "You have a good eye for books," she remarked one day, watching me arrange a display. "You write it all?" I hesitated. Writing was Olivia's dream, the passion that had cost her everything. Could Emma risk the same? "A little," I admitted. "Thought so. You've got that look, like you're always narrating the world in your head." That night, in my rented room above a Vietnamese restaurant, I opened my laptop, purchased with 6 weeks of savings, and began to write. Not journal entries this time, but a story about a girl whose identity was stolen, whose life was curated by others while she watched from the shadows. I created a blog under another pseudonym, The Basement Diaries. Each post was framed as fiction, but the emotions were raw and real. I described the psychological toll of imprisonment, the surreal experience of watching your life being lived by an imposter. The response was immediate and unexpected. Comments flooded in. "This is the most haunting thing I've ever read. I feel like I'm suffocating with her. Is this really fiction? It feels too visceral." Readers connected with the nameless protagonist's pain, her determination, her fury. The blog gained traction, mentioned on literary websites, shared across social media platforms. All while I served coffee and shelved books, invisible in plain sight. 6 months after my escape, I gathered enough courage to check my social media accounts. The charade continued flawlessly. Oxford Olivia had finished her term with honors and was now doing a summer internship at a prestigious London publishing house. She attended gallery openings, networked with literary agents, and posted profound observations about expatriate life. Meanwhile, the real me lived in a 300-square-foot apartment, showered at a gym to save on water bills, and wrote by the light of a single lamp until dawn. But something was shifting. The Basement Diaries had caught the attention of an editor at a small but respected publishing house. "This voice is extraordinary," read the email to my anonymous account. "The authenticity of the trauma, the resilience of the character. We'd love to discuss turning this into a book." I stared at the message for hours. A book deal. The dream that had started everything, now within reach. But accepting meant stepping out of the shadows, at least partially. I met the editor, Natalie, at a coffee shop, introducing myself as Emma Walsh. I explained that The Basement Diaries was based on someone I knew, maintaining the fiction that it was an autobiography. "It needs to be a novel," I insisted. Names changed, details altered. Natalie agreed, offering an advance that made me dizzy. "We just need your legal name for contracts." That night, I visited a lawyer recommended by Mira. For a hefty fee, he helped me legally change my name from Olivia Caldwell to Emma Walsh, using the limited identification I'd managed to gather. It wasn't entirely above board, but it was legitimate enough for publishing contracts. As I signed my new name on the dotted line, I felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation. Olivia was finished, in a way, buried beneath Emma's growing success. I wrote feverishly, pouring my experiences into a novel titled Oxford Girl. The story followed a young woman whose wealthy family fakes her attendance at a prestigious university while keeping her prisoner at home. When it ends with her escape and reinvention, readers assume it's a triumphant conclusion. They don't realize it's only the middle of my story. When Oxford Girl was published, it resonated with readers in ways I never anticipated. Book clubs dissected the family dynamics. Reviewers praised the unflinching examination of parental narcissism and the haunting authenticity of the protagonist's voice. It climbed bestseller lists, earning acclaim that would have made my parents proud had they known their daughter wrote it. I watched from a safe distance as they were interviewed on a morning show about their daughter's success in England. They beamed with practiced modesty as the host held up Oxford Olivia's latest Instagram post, a carefully staged photo of me at a London book signing, celebrating another writer's work. We always encouraged her creativity. My mother lied smoothly. We knew she was destined for greatness. I sipped my coffee and smiled. They had no idea that the real Oxford Girl was watching them, planning the next chapter, one they never saw coming. My second novel, Ghostwriter, was scheduled for release exactly 2 years after my escape. The publicity team planned a lavish launch at the Athenaeum in Boston, my hometown, though they didn't know it. My publisher believed Emma Walsh was from Chicago, with no connection to Massachusetts. "Are you sure about Boston?"
Natalie asked.
"We could do New York or Chicago instead." "It has to be Boston," I insisted. "The story is set there." Ghostwriter wasn't just set in Boston, it named names. While Oxford Girl had been carefully fictionalized, this new book was a calculated missile aimed at the heart of the Caldwell Empire. I'd changed just enough details to avoid libel while ensuring anyone who knew my family would recognize the characters. In the weeks leading up to the launch, I orchestrated the final pieces of my plan. I hired a private investigator to compile evidence of my parents' deception, screenshots of the fake social media posts, timestamps proving they originated from Boston rather than England, testimonials from service workers who'd seen me in the house during my supposed Oxford days. I also arranged a meeting with Vanessa Chen, a journalist known for exposing high society scandals. We met in a quiet cafe in Cambridge. "Why me?" she asked after I revealed my true identity and showed her my evidence. "Because you're not afraid of powerful people," I replied. "And because you fact-check thoroughly. When this breaks, the Caldwells will try to discredit me any way they can." She studied the documentation with narrowed eyes. "If what you're saying is true, it's criminal. False imprisonment, identity theft, fraud." "I know. That's why I need irrefutable proof." "Your family's connections run deep," she warned. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" I thought of the basement, the cold concrete, the stolen years. I've already lived through the worst they could do to me. The night of the book launch arrived with perfect autumn weather. The Athenaeum glowed with warm light, its historic reading rooms filled with literary Boston's elite. Champagne flowed as attendees speculated about the mysterious Emma Walsh, who had appeared from nowhere to become publishing's latest sensation. I stood backstage, dressed in a black suit that felt like armor. My hair was styled differently than Olivia's had been, my makeup subtly altering my features. It wouldn't fool my family up close, but from a distance, I could pass as someone else. Through a gap in the curtains, I spotted them in the front row. My parents, Claire and James, all dressed impeccably, all wearing expressions of cultured interest. They'd come because Ghostwriter was the literary event of the season, and the Caldwells never missed an opportunity to be seen at important cultural gatherings. They had no idea they were about to become the spectacle. Natalie introduced me with effusive praise. A voice that speaks truth to power, a writer who understands the dark undercurrents beneath pristine surfaces. Please welcome Emma Walsh. I walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. The bright lights obscured the audience, but I knew exactly where my family sat. I began my prepare remarks, talking about Ghostwriter and its themes of deception and resilience. Then, 16 minutes into my speech, I deviated from the script. Before I read from the novel, I'd like to tell you a true story, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's about a girl whose family told everyone she was studying abroad, when in reality, she was imprisoned in their basement. A murmur rippled through the audience. In the front row, my mother leaned forward, squinting at me with sudden uncertainty. My birth name is Olivia Caldwell, I continued, removing the glasses that had been part of Emma's disguise. 2 years ago, I escaped from captivity in my parents' home after they locked me away for refusing to abandon my writing dreams. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Cameras flashed. My father half rose from his seat, his face contorted with shock. While I was trapped, they created a fictional life for me on social media, telling friends and family I was studying at Oxford. They're here tonight, Richard and Eleanor Caldwell, sitting in the front row. All heads turned toward my parents. My mother's face had gone chalk white. My father was frantically whispering to someone beside him. I have evidence, I said, as Vanessa Chin stood up from her seat, holding a folder. Documented proof of everything I've described. Ms. Chun of the Boston Globe has verified my claims independently. The audience was completely silent now, collective breath held. The irony is, I continued, while they were posting fake photos of Oxford Olivia, the real me was writing Oxford Girl, the novel they proudly told people their daughter was studying too hard to come home and discuss. I held up a copy of my first book. This is what they tried to destroy. This is why they locked me away. Because I wanted to write stories instead of following their prescribed path. Security guards moved toward my parents as they attempted to leave. Camera phones recorded their stunned expressions. I'm not here for revenge, I said, though part of me savored their public humiliation. I'm here for the truth. And for every child whose parents tried to suffocate their dreams instead of nurturing them. I stepped back from the podium as chaos erupted. Journalists rushed forward. Attendees stood on chairs for a better view. My father shouted denials that no one believed. And through it all, I remained perfectly calm, the eye of the hurricane I had spent 2 years creating. The Caldwell legacy was unraveling thread by thread, broadcast live on 100 social media feeds. The family that had tried to erase me was now being erased itself, their carefully constructed image dissolving in real time. Oxford Girl had come home. The morning after my revelation, #OxfordGirl and #BasementDaughter dominated social media. My publisher's phone lines collapsed under the weight of interview requests. News vans camped outside the Caldwell mansion, where the gates remained firmly closed. I watched it unfold from a hotel suite, surrounded by my legal team. We'd anticipated every countermove my parents might make. They're claiming you're mentally ill, my lawyer informed me, reviewing their hastily assembled press statement, saying you fabricated the story due to your long-standing psychological issues. I nodded, unsurprised. Right on schedule. We've already filed for a restraining order, she continued. And the police want to take your statement about the false imprisonment. Within hours, my evidence became public. My detailed journals with dates and conversations, the fake Instagram posts traced back to Boston IP addresses, timestamps proving I was posting as Emma while Olivia was supposedly in England. Most damning were the security camera footage from our home system, which my father had forgotten I knew how to access remotely, showing me being escorted to the basement and my mother delivering meals down the stairs. The Caldwell empire began to crumble with breathtaking speed. My father's company announced his temporary leave of absence by afternoon. By evening, the board had voted to remove him permanently. The charities my mother chaired issued statements distancing themselves from her. Universities rushed to revoke honorary degrees. Former friends claimed they'd always sensed something off about the family. Claire called first, leaving a tearful voicemail. I'm so sorry, Liv. They told me you were having a breakdown, that you needed space. I didn't know. Please believe me. James's message came next. They threatened to cut me off if I asked questions. I was a coward. I don't expect forgiveness. My parents' attempts at damage control only dug them deeper. My father's aggressive denials on a morning show came across as entitled rage. My mother's tearful interview, where she claimed they were protecting me, was eviscerated by critics who pointed out that her designer outfit cost more than most people's monthly salary. 3 days after the revelation, criminal charges were filed. The district attorney, eager to make an example of the influential couple who'd abused their power, pursued multiple felony counts. I declined to give interviews, letting my books speak for themselves. Oxford Girl returned to the top of bestseller lists, joined by Ghostwriter. My publisher rushed a memoir into production, but I was in no hurry. The story wasn't finished yet. A week later, an envelope arrived at my hotel. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother. Olivia, what we did was unforgivable. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness. We thought we were saving you from yourself, but we were only protecting our own image. The basement was wrong. The lies were wrong. Everything was wrong. I've lost everything that once seemed important, my reputation, my social standing, my freedom. But losing you was the greatest punishment, and one we deserved. Your books are beautiful. You were right, and we were wrong. With regret, Eleanor. I read it twice, searching for manipulation, finding only defeat. It changed nothing. Their regret came not from recognition of their cruelty, but from facing its consequences. The legal proceedings moved swiftly, culminating in a plea deal to avoid a trial that would further damage the family name. My parents received suspended sentences, hefty fines, and community service, a lenient outcome that reflected their connections even in disgrace. The true punishment was their fall from grace, their permanent exile from the society they'd valued above their daughter's well-being. A year after my revelation, I purchased a brownstone in Brooklyn with my book earnings. On moving day, I discovered a small package outside my door. Inside was the silver charm bracelet my grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday, which I'd thought lost forever. There was no note, no explanation, just the return of something precious that had been taken from me. That evening, I sat in my new writing room, the bracelet on my wrist, and began my next novel. Not about basements or Oxford or revenge, but about rebuilding. About the family we choose, rather than the one we're born into. About second chances and new beginnings. I no longer needed to be Olivia or Emma. I could simply be myself, a writer whose voice would never again be silenced. On my desk sat framed copies of my book covers, alongside a news clipping. Caldwell Charity Foundation rebrands, dedicates resources to mental health and youth autonomy. It was headed by Claire, her attempt at atonement. I hadn't forgiven them. Perhaps I never would. But their perfect lie had become my perfect truth. I had finally become the writer I'd always dreamed of being, successful on my own terms. My parents had tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed, and I was just beginning to bloom.